Hey guys, it's Kevin, my review for the United States versus Billie Holiday. What the United States versus Billie Holiday is essentially about is we center on Billie Holiday, and she basically is in the 1940s, and, you know, she's this big mega superstar. She's performing at all these concerts and things like that. Everyone really does seem to love her, but she has this song called Strange Fruit, which basically refers to a lot of the injustices that were going on, you know, within America at the time, and still some of which are going on today, but also a lot of the public lynchings that were going on. And when the government hears word of this song, they do everything they can to try to ban it, and we really do see the impact that this does slowly start to have on her life, and sadly her real decline overall. So United States versus Billie Holiday, I was initially very excited for this film. Just hearing the prospect of a Billie Holiday biopic is one that definitely had me very excited, especially because Billie Holiday, I feel like, is one of those figures where her story just has not been given the justice that it really does deserve. I've always heard there's more going on with this story that not enough people talk about, and I was like, okay, this is great, but then the trailer came out and it just really fell flat for me, and I became a lot less interested once I saw it. It just felt like a very generic, almost Lifetimey movie, and I just wasn't really expecting all that much from this film. So when it was brought to Hulu, obviously it was originally going to come to theaters. I really wasn't all that shocked. I did finally get to check it out though, and I will say this is not a terrible movie, but it's not really a great one either. What I think could have been a really effective and very timely biopic instead feels very stagnant and honestly kind of shallow as a result, and a film that just doesn't really dive into the stuff that you really want it to overall, and I think that's what really does bring this film down. But we are just getting into right now, starting off with the cast, and easily that is the best thing about this film. I think the cast here is the thing that really keeps this film from being a complete disaster, especially when it comes to its main performance in Andra, which, yes, she did recently win a Golden Globe for this performance, and though I may have been a little bit taken aback when that initially happened, in fact, my reaction was not a very favorable one, now watching it here, it's definitely a deserving performance, because she absolutely electrifies in this role. I mean, the way that she completely transforms this character already is very impressive, but what truly makes her a revelation, and I think what really puts her above everything else in that movie and gives her that, Oscar, that awards-deserving performance, is really just how much she's able to show how this situation affected Holiday. I mean, this really took a toll on her, both physically and emotionally, and Day really doesn't hold back in showing that visceral effect, and I really love the way she ended up doing that here. The physicality as well was so well done. You can really tell how much she researched into this role, and especially the fact that Day is not an actress. This is her first role that she's ever done, and I think that's incredible, the way that she was able to already completely transform into this character and give what is such a startlingly realistic performance in that way. It gives this film an authenticity. It gives this film a sense of realness to it that it just otherwise would not have, and I think she absolutely is the thing that, when all else fails, really does anchor this entire film. Now, I will say, in terms of the rest of the performances here, everyone else does do a good job. Trevante Rhodes is pretty good as the character of Jimmy Fletcher. He does a pretty good job in it overall, and him and Andra actually do have pretty good chemistry. Garrett Hedlund, I thought, was very flat, unfortunately. I was really not that impressed by him in this film. He honestly felt kind of like he was going through the motions here, and I've seen some really strong performances from him lately, so I was pretty let down by how he ended up doing here. I just was not very impressed by his performance here, very much at all. Leslie Jordan is fine here, I guess, and Natasha Lyonne is completely wasted in this movie. I honestly don't know what the point of her really is. She doesn't really do much of anything here to serve a real purpose, and I think her talents were kind of wasted here. Again, the rest of the cast isn't bad, but nobody really is on Day's level. She really is the thing that brings this film together overall. But now let's get to the directing and the writing, which the directing, oh boy, this is easily the thing I think that brings this entire film down. Lee Daniels as a director, I just don't think did a very good job with this film. He doesn't seem to understand the true potential of this movie. You know, a lot of this film, it should feel very emotional. I mean, a big portion of this film has to do with the lynchings of Black Americans, something that happened a lot in the 1940s, and there was a law that was passed and it didn't go through, and, you know, again, it should feel very dramatic, it should feel very emotional, it should really, you know, be gut-wrenching to watch, but it's directed in such a lazy and honestly uninspired manner. It didn't really feel like Daniels was particularly taken by this story. It just kind of feels like any other biopic, and it's a real shame because I feel like with an actual passionate director behind it, this really could have been something special, but it just feels like it's missing something. You know, it doesn't really feel like he does much of anything to really put in that effort and put in that passion to really make this something special, but he really didn't do that, and I think the film really does fall flat because of it. It doesn't help that the writing to this film feels incredibly one note, which is really surprising, again, considering the layers that Andra Day puts into her performance. The film overall just isn't very interesting to watch, especially because so much of this movie is just focused around one song, and I understand, this song is very significant towards Billie Holiday. A lot of people say that this was a reason why she ended up falling as an artist, because of the way that she was unfairly targeted because of it. But there's only so much you can do centering around literally just the banning of one song. The film does not focus on the things that it really should. It's clear in this film, for example, that Billie Holiday is in a very abusive relationship, but that is all put in the background of this movie. We don't really get to see the way that's played up. It's almost played up to a over-the-top degree. It's not played in a way that feels real. It's very corny and just doesn't feel, again, it doesn't feel realistic enough. It doesn't feel like this is something that actually affected Holiday all that much. It just feels like it's something that is there because it needs to be there, and I feel like that's something that definitely needed a lot more focus. Or the way that Holiday is really focused on, you know, making sure that her music is done in the way that it should. Her manager doesn't seem to care very much about her, and we just don't really get to see much of that at all. You know, we see that her manager is someone that isn't really doing much to handle this situation. She really wants something to be done because she wants to be able to perform. You know, people still really do love her, and even though she's being seen as this controversial figure, she really does want to make a difference. She really does want people to see her in a way that's inspiring, but her manager isn't doing jack shit, and we don't really get to see much more than that. It feels, again, just very one note. These are things that the film really should have dived more into, but instead what we focus on is a very generic story of how the Bureau basically ruled this as a narcotics case, and how in doing so it really did plunge Holiday deeper into failure. She really did start to fail because of this. This was definitely her tragic fall. And I just don't think the film really did take the time to focus on that all that much. Instead, the film is far too focused on this relationship that she has with Trevante Rhodes' character, which apparently might not have even happened, her relationship with Jimmy Fletcher. It's presented as this big portion of the movie, but we just don't really care all that much about it. Yes, he is someone that is truly falling in love with Holiday, and he starts to change as a character, but it's such a generic story of just the good cop that is reformed, and he starts off, with bad intentions, but because the fact that he gets so close to the person that he is investigating, he really starts to feel a genuine connection and a genuine change of heart. And it's like, we've seen this story done so many times before, and there was another way that I think they could have made this work. They could have actually made this somewhat effective, but they just really don't. The closest that I think we get to something that is generally emotionally startling is there's a scene where Billie is walking into this backyard, and she sees this child crying out to her mother, and basically sees like this whole yard full of just lynched victims, and you see how this really does affect her. This to me is the only scene in the movie that generally felt, like, okay, now it seems like they understand how emotional this situation was. They understand the intensity of this situation. They understand, how heavy this really was. A lot of it just feels very whatever. It's presented in a very boring manner, and it just isn't very exciting to watch, and I just don't think they did a very good job with leaning very heavily into that situation. It's not until the final 30 minutes of the movie when I really started to care. The final 30 minutes is generally very devastating, and it really did feel like finally they were starting to dive deep into the way this was affecting Holiday, and the way this really started to have a negative effect on her, and the way that she herself was deteriorating physically. It's really sad to watch, for sure. But unfortunately, the 2 hours that were leading up to that are almost a complete bore to sit through, because you just don't care too much about what's going on, because there's so much that they are skipping over that they very much should not. And I just don't think the film really takes the time to do that. We understand why this song is important to Billie. We do. But the film needed to take it one step beyond that. How is this song inspiring other people? Let's see more, let's see more relatives of victims that have been lynched and how this has affected Holiday. Let's see how the government is trying to manipulate her. Let's see how they turned her into a drug addict. There's so many things that they could have dived more into here, and the film just doesn't. It wants to tell a very generic story, but I don't think that's what this film really deserved. I feel like Billie Holiday deserved a lot better than that, and as a result, the screenplay just really falls very flat here for sure. The structure to this film also is really weird. We're constantly cutting back and forth from the 1940s to a period in the 1950s, and we don't have much significance of what's actually going on. We know that something has clearly happened to Holiday to make her feel this way, but we're cutting back to this character played by Leslie Jordan that we just don't really care about, and we don't understand why this is so important. And I just don't think it was the right structure for this film, because we already know what's going to happen to Holiday. We know that she's going to deteriorate in that way, and I think the film thought that by doing this it would make things feel generally more intriguing. It would make us more interested in like what really causes this situation, but all it really did was confuse me. I just didn't really understand why they made this choice, and I just don't think it really worked for this movie. It's yet another thing that I think was just very miscalculated on their part, and I think if they had retooled some things, definitely could have made the film a lot better overall. The cinematography, though, is really great in this film. Production design-wise, things like that, they really did go all out in capturing this time period as well as they really could have, and I think they definitely did a really good job with that for sure. And the music, I mean, the score here is really great. The fact that Andra sang all of this music herself, I think is also very impressive, especially when you hear how her voice actually is compared to how she sings as Holiday, far more raspier, and just closer to what Holiday would have sounded like. I mean, it is amazing to listen to, and definitely one of the best parts of this movie, and I think the music is really good here, and definitely one of the things that keeps this film from being a complete disaster. But the editing as well, I mean, this film is just way too long. There are so many scenes that just drag out, and nothing is really happening, especially scenes in the bureau. Those scenes really bored me because you don't have any characters that you care about there. There's not really any reason to give a shit about what they're talking about. You know, you don't really care why they're targeting her. You just want to see how this is affecting Billie, and you just don't really get to see that as much as you really want to, and I think that just really sours the entire film. Look, The United States vs. Billie Holiday, it's not a terrible movie. It has a masterful performance from Andra. It does have some generally affecting moments overall, but beyond the surface of that, this just feels like a really generic biopic that we've seen done before. It doesn't do anything that different. It has a lot of cliches that sadly this film falls into. It has very dispassionate directing, and overall it just feels like a film that really lost sight of its true potential. I think this film could have generally been something that was very special, but overall it just feels like Oscar bait at the end of the day, and that's really the best way that I can sum this up here. The United States vs. Billie Holiday was very disappointing, and I am going to give it a C-. But over, guys, to my review of The United States vs. Billie Holiday. Let me know what you guys saw this movie. All left your thoughts, and we'll see you guys in my next video, and we'll see you guys for that. Okay, bye.